want to talk a little bit about the three most important and even potent forces within the Middle East over the last 100 years or so. And these are not necessarily in order: nationalism, Islamism, and anti-Israeli feeling. The only one that I intend to look at in a kind of a survey is that of nationalism. Might look at the other two later on. Starting in the 19th century, the Middle East was to witness the rise of Arab nationalism, and it has grown more intense with each passing decade. This rise of national identity or nationalism was in reaction to the Turkification policies pursued by the Ottoman government in the early 20th century. The British, as enemies of the Ottoman Empire in World War I, did much to stoke the fires of Arab resentment against their Turkish overlords. After World War I, when Britain and France took control of most of the Arab lands, leading elements of Arab society were to use the people's desires for independence from foreign control to emphasize that the proud peoples of the Arab lands should and could rule themselves. Arab nationalism began as a literary movement in Syria and Lebanon, and the earliest of Arab nationalists were Christian Arabs. It began innocently enough as a literary revival of the Arabic language and the recalling of past glories of Arab history from the time of Muhammad to the world state of Caliphal Islam. And Caliphal Islam, you can say its glory days were approximately from about 650 up to about 1000. Now this cultural revival drew in Islamic intellectuals as well. Contact with Europe through trade, travel, education acquainted literate Arabs with Western ideas of nationalism, socialism, individualism, democracy, and other ideologies as well. This made some Arabs think about refashioning their society so as to achieve a modern state and society, as was the case in Europe. Now you have all throughout the 19th century nationalist revolts that broke out in the Balkan territories of the Ottoman Empire. And by 1900, most of the long-suffering peoples of the Ottoman Balkan territories were free, and they formed the new states of Greece, Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria. You have within the Ottoman Empire what's called the Young Turk movement. And the Young Turk movement tried to build a loyalty to the Ottoman Empire on the basis of being Ottoman, that is, belonging to or being a subject of the Ottoman Empire. This sense of being Ottoman was essentially a failure, because you find that the different nationalities and the peoples of different religion really did not identify with that. So then you find the Young Turk government, because you have these Young Turks who eventually came into power within the Ottoman Empire. And so they came to emphasize being Turk, emphasizing the Turkish language and Turkish culture. This policy becomes known as the policy of Turkification, and becoming like a Turk alienated many peoples of the Ottoman Empire, and in particular Arabs, because basically these people did not choose to see themselves as Turks. There already was an Arab nationalist movement in Egypt in the late 19th century. Egyptians resented British rule. The British had placed themselves in power over Egypt essentially in 1882, and British control over Egypt was to remain for the most part up to and through and even sometime after World War II. So the Egyptians very much resented British domination. They wanted freedom from Britain, and they did not want to come back under Ottoman control. So there was a anti-British Egyptian nationalist movement that one sees already in the late 19th century. So you can say that there are sources of Arab nationalism which are building in Syria, in those dominions of Ottoman territory, and you already see it as well in Egypt. Now, it was World War I that gave the increasingly dissatisfied Arabs their chance to split from the Ottoman Empire and the hope to realize a great Arab state. The British in this war against the Ottomans in World War I encouraged what became known as the Arab Revolt in 1916. Arab nationalism was not just associated with one part of the Arab world. It was to become a much larger movement to be known as Pan-Arabism. And Pan-Arabism means essentially trying to bring about the unification of all the Arab peoples into one great nation state. The person most associated with that is President Abdel Gamal Nasser, who will become president of Egypt, essentially the military dictator of Egypt from about 1953 up until his death in 1970. And he in particular, his program, The Voice of the Arabs, over Egyptian radio, was to become sort of like the main focus of stirring up the different Arab peoples, and with this idea of being one nation. Now, coming back to the Ottoman Empire, it did collapse in World War I. You had a combination of the Arabs in revolt, assisted by the British Army, cleared the Turks out of Arab lands. And the promise of the British and French to help the Arabs establish this great state were completely false. So you find that you have the establishment of what's called the mandate system after World War I under the League of Nations. And this is a polite way of saying that essentially the Arab lands were given over to British and French control. And as I mentioned, of course, this was going to last until after World War I. And this has long-term consequences, because if you look at the geopolitical map of the Middle East, you can essentially say all the boundaries of all those countries were drawn by the Europeans. Now, President Wilson of the United States believed very much in self-determination for peoples, and so he was of the opinion at the Versailles Peace Conference that the Arabs, as well as many other peoples, should be allowed to determine their own future under some system of democratic self-government. However, that was not to be, because, as I mentioned, you have Britain and France that essentially double-crossed their Arab allies, and so what you see then is a French Syria, a British Iraq, a British Palestine as well. And that moves us on basically to Palestine, because there you can say the Arab peoples of Palestine acquired a new nationalism among themselves as a result of the loss of their homeland in 1948 with the rise of an independent Israel on the ruins of Arab Palestine. The bitter defeats experienced by the Palestinians and the other Arab peoples, principally Egypt and Syria and Jordan, at the hands of the Israelis has only intensified Arab nationalism. Ever since the early 20th century, Arab nationalism has provided the most effective means of raising the Arab peoples against the interference and intervention of the West. And that also includes, obviously, opposition to the United States as well. So that you have this dream, then, which obviously is very much unrealized, and that is for the Arab peoples to be able to create a powerful modern state embracing all of the Arab peoples. Or at the least, a secondary vision is that of a free and independent association of modern Arab states working together for the common good.